It was a full-time job to be an alcoholic. I had to, and this is what I relate, and when I tell some of my stories to people, that you may not be there yet, but you're going to be the way you're going.
You are a warrior.
321 status.
What kind of vehicle is it?
You are the very best your nation has to offer.
911.
Multiple shots fired.
They're asking you to lead.
5, we need a Bearcat.
It's up to us.
So 133, I need somebody that's got a visual on where the shooter is.
You must be sound in mind, body, and spirit.
42, where's the officer down? I have a rescue helicopter that wants to land and help.
This is the podcast that will make you the one.
Copy, running eastbound.
The one that will bring everyone back.
I believe we have shots fired. Give me back up now.
Because no one else is coming.
We're going to have an officer shot. 100 block of East Street.
Suspect is down.
This is The Squad Room.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Squad Room, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenging terrain of our demanding careers. The show is about being one day stronger every day in some way, and how we can be better leaders that this world needs us to be. It really is about being the best version of ourselves every day, myself included. Before we get to the interview, I want to remind you that you can get more information on this episode and every other episode, including show notes and links, by going to thesquadroom.net. You can also subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, any podcast program that you like. And, of course, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at The Squad Room to stay up to date. We have a sponsor I want to thank as well for this episode, Ranger Up Clothing. Many of you know them, founded by some military veterans who make T-shirts for military, law enforcement, and other first responders, fire. Make some pretty funny T-shirts, some pretty motivating T-shirts, stuff that I like and I wear, and they support the mission of this show. So if you're a Ranger Up fan, you can go to rangerup.com and use the code TheSquadRoom, all one word, for 10% off your order. And if you're new, you've never heard of Ranger Up, check them out on YouTube. They got some funny videos, and their website is pretty cool as well. Our guest today is retired Sergeant Joey Rafferty. Joey is an open book, first of all. But Joey has had a career that I think mirrors a lot of us, and had a downward spiral that he didn't realize was even occurring until he crashed and burned. Literally crashed his patrol car while DUI with his kids in the car. And it hurts me almost to even say that out loud and think about what that was like, the shame, the anger that his family must feel, the anger that he must feel at himself. And Joey realized as a result of that he had a problem. He was an alcoholic. And I wanted to have Joey on the show because he's one of the few officers I know that has gone through a formal rehab program, like a 30-day inpatient rehab program, has relapsed, gone back through rehab, and has come out the other end stronger. And like I just said here in this intro, the whole goal is to be one day stronger. And to me, Joey appears and seems to be stronger maybe than he's ever been. He deals with PTSD, most likely from the job, possibly from growing up. He was diagnosed after 27 years on the job as being bipolar. And Joey's story can be anybody's story. It really could be. And as he points out, we are recruited from the human race. We have the same failings, the same struggles, the same insecurities and ego as any other profession. And sure, there's stopgaps in place to prevent some of those things from getting us hired, but we struggle just like anybody else. And to assume that we shouldn't struggle because we are the thin blue line is absurd. So the last thing I want is for someone to be struggling and not get help. And so I think Joey's story today, even if this doesn't relate to you directly, probably relates to a partner of yours, And it gives you a lot of warning signs about what to look for in yourself as you progress through your career, as this job starts to take a toll on you, that you can be aware of to set off the red flags so that you don't end up in the position where Joey was, where he spent 6 days in jail, lost his job, and lost the career that meant everything to him. So I want to thank Joey for his time and his honesty and the story. It is a long episode. I don't talk very much because Joey is very good at telling his story, and I just let him roll with it. And I try to ask questions that I think are important, but Joey just is rolls with it. He was a sergeant for a sheriff's office right outside Philadelphia, between Philadelphia and Trenton, two very busy cities, very dynamic policing environments. He has seen a lot. And I hope that you will listen to Joey's story, reach out to him and let him know that it meant something to you if it connects with you. And we will post in the show notes for this episode some resources for you or your partners. If you feel that you need this kind of help, we want to make sure we can help direct you to it. So go to thesquadroom.net. You can find this episode, and there will be some links to the types of services that Joey talks about in this episode. So without further ado, one quick word before we get started. There is some language. I would say there is language in this episode. It's an adult conversation. So just a heads up in case you have little ears listening at this point, you probably want to listen to this one by yourself. If you're in charge of maintaining and replacing your agency's firearms or have a hand in that decision-making process, I want you to pay close attention for a minute. This episode is brought to you by ProForce, the largest firearms distributor on the West Coast and the only taser distributor in the West. ProForce is known amongst Southern California and Arizona cops for their great deals on firearms, holsters, and accessories, but what a lot of people don't know is that they also do agency sales, and they are responsible for firearms procurement for some of the largest departments in the United States. Their business is helping agencies replace their aging firearms with modern equipment at the best prices available. They've tackled massive replacement programs and also have a buyback program for officers that helps them hold on to a firearm that might mean a lot to them. After 18 years in business, ProForce knows how to help agencies navigate all the challenges that come with transitioning to a new firearm. And believe me, there are plenty. If your agency's firearms are at the point where they need to be replaced and you have a say in the process, you should really check out ProForce. I'm confident you'll get great customer service and a fantastic price on any of the major brands that are out there. They've helped agencies transition to everything from Smith & Wesson, the MMP, to the Sig Sauer P320 or the Glock 17, and every model in between. Also, don't forget about your long guns. They carry Remington, Colt, and many others. Check them out at proforceonline.com or call their sales department at 1-800-367-5855. Again, that number 1-800-367-5855, or email them at sales@proforceonline.com. They'll hook you up with a free, no pressure, and no obligation quote. Just make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Squad Room. Joey Rafferty, welcome to the Squad Room.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Looking forward to this conversation, man, because you're somebody who I've found who wears it on your sleeve, right? And you got a story that I think so many of us can relate to in some way. And in fact, a lot of us are going to hear your story and think they're going to get uncomfortable hearing this story because it's going to come really close to reality for a lot of people, right? But
oh, absolutely.
But the first thing I want to point out is that we have something in common just to begin with. We're both, you were a sergeant for a sheriff's office. You're out in Pennsylvania. People are going to notice your accent's a little different than mine.
Absolutely.
But walk us through your career. Like when did you start? What year did you go through the academy?
I started in, it was 1990. I started in as a dispatcher. I was working nights and going to school during the day. I had a hankering. I wanted to get in the sheriff's office. I know that they usually transfer county employees first before they went outside. That really wasn't the point until they had 7 they needed to hire. So they threw a bone to me, as a county employee. So I was a trainer in radio. I knew the ins and outs of radio verbiage. It was just a good fit for both. They hired me, and almost right away, I already knew what they did as a department. So I totally facilitated me looking great by doing everything I already knew how to do as a new employee.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I worked my ass off, and I made a name for myself that I hustled. I didn't come in for 8 hours and then just go home, hit a time card. I like to have fun. And the way I used to look at it is, you gave me 8 hours and I got to fuck with anybody I wanted for 8 hours. So nonetheless, yeah, I became acting corporal. In the interim, I was assigned as a team leader for a major incident response team. And that was, I think, 10 years into my career. So I ended my career as a sergeant, but I'll backtrack real quick. So I earned those accolades as a deputy. And then we had a new chief come in, and he had said to me, how would you feel about being an acting corporal? So, of course, I said, I think I would do an amazing job as a corporal, and I would put me in the warrant unit. I quickly was told, well, when you're chief, you could do whatever you want. Nonetheless, the testing came up, and I blew past corporal. I was already acting, so I made sergeant. That's when my career really took off. Right before that, I was a SWAT negotiator. I was assigned to internal affairs. I was the warrant supervisor, counterterrorism detail out to Philly for big events like the Eagles games or RNC, DNC, the Pope visits. And then I resumed my role in my department. So essentially I had like 5 different functions as a sergeant, which is going to probably lead to my story as we progress further.
Right.
Not to mention this, but it kind of parlays into the same vernacular, is that I have 4 kids with the stay-at-home ex-wife during this whole process. So just to give your viewers and your listeners a little of, the background before I go into the story.
And so you're in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, is where you're employed. What is that? Like, give us where is that, the size of the department, and that kind of stuff? Because I'm realizing too that there are differences between a sheriff's department in California versus like a sheriff's department in New York. And it seems like one consistency is that we all handle courts and jails, right? We all handle, except for municipal courts, but we all handle county courts and jails. But some sheriff's departments are just courts and jails. Others are, like mine, are what you would probably describe as like a full service agency, where we do patrol, we do investigations, we do those things in addition to controlling the jails and courts. What is your county like?
Our county it's actually pretty unique because we do have a full service, so to speak, and officers that are trained. Background of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is that the police chiefs, there's 54 different municipalities in my county.
Wow. Just in your county.
That county, that's 54 different chiefs that you're going to piss off because you're going into their territory. I used to say I have a gold badge because I can go anywhere in the county. And you can't. You have to stay in your township or boroughs. So we were pretty much like a backup role with local police departments. We weren't dispatched, but they knew our sector, so they would dispatch us in as a secondary unit. We did not run traffic, and that's because the sheriff probably didn't want that because it would take away potential votes. And that's what when you have it's really a row office, essentially. I mean, my boss was fantastic. He was a Philly captain. He retired there. He went over to another municipality in my county and was a chief there. And then he became the chief of law enforcement authority in Pennsylvania. So I always say my county is the body. And then you have Trenton, New Jersey as the armpit. And then you have Philadelphia as the armpit. So basically those two pollinate back into Bucks County.
Right.
You could go from the bottom county, which is, you get your drugs, you get your, high calls. And then you could go all the way to the upper end of the county where they got horses and they talk like this. So it's really wherever you want to play, which was fantastic for me in warrants. I would go where there's plenty of fish in the sea. I'm running from house to house. We're checking out leads. So there's a civil division where all they do is civil process. They're, certain lawsuits, levies, rules of replevin, all those items. They have a warrant division, and most of the people that are Act 120 are allowed to write tickets, but we're kind of told not to because I could be in the highest of my county at one day, and then I'll have a citation there, but then I'll be down the lower end of the county, which is essentially I think it's like 70 miles from one to the other. So I essentially be doing court in two different jurisdictions at the same time.
Right.
And our role, I used to always say that I didn't want any more. They give us too much responsibility as it is, and you're going to add something to it. Mm-hmm. Where you get the young guys that came in the department, and it's funny, like, yeah, we want to write tickets. We don't have to. I didn't want any of that. I had a warrant, and there's a jail, and that's where that guy was going. No paperwork. Got guy in custody, period.
And how early on did you have your kids? Once you were on the job?
Early on, I had my kids every other weekend and Wednesdays.
No, I mean, when were they born?
Okay. I was. Let's see. I got married. My oldest son is he's 18 now, so he was born in 2000. Okay. I have they're 2 boys, 2 girls, and it's sandwiched. My son, then my daughter, who's 15 now, my younger son, who's 13, and then my baby, who's turning 10 this month.
So you'd already been on the job for 10 years before you had kids.
Yeah, so I mean, it was an easy transition for me. I had a stay-at-home ex-wife, so my flexibility on my schedule worked. And then what I would end up doing is I would work under or work over. So I pretty much essentially my tail end of my career, I was 3 a.m. to 3 p. Mm-hmm. And I was only getting paid for 8 hours, but there was such a demand, and most of my department knew my ins and outs, and they knew that I knew the ins and outs of a job. So if they were calling me, there's pretty good reason why they're calling me, because they can't make a decision and they're iffy about policy and procedures. Mm-hmm. Even as down to, we'd put a new warrant unit out there, and they'd go to a door, knock on the door, and the person would say, "You're not coming in," slam the door and go away. And, if you're going into that house, you better make sure you're coming out with a body, first off. But the second thing is we have a body warrant. And these lawyers and attorneys that they think they are, like, you don't have a search warrant. No, I have something better. It's called a body warrant. Right. And I could search. It doesn't say the judge said, well, if the door's shut, you can't go in. And I'm not allowed to go through your panty drawers to find a body. Right.
So I'm curious, when you met your wife and got married, were you already an officer or a deputy, or did she know you beforehand?
She knew me right when I was a dispatcher, and I was working 3 to 11s, which was the best relationship you could ever have with someone, because you're pretty much not there when they're there, I say that's why the marriage lasted 18 years. So nonetheless, I was a dispatcher when I met her, and she knew I was aspiring to be an officer. She wasn't happy about it, and it even became more prevalent when I'd leave for work and we had a baby, and I got stuck by a needle once, so I had to go to the hospital to get tested, and that's scared. When you have a newborn, you're getting tested for HIV or any other transmissible diseases that you occurred while making an arrest.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So that was something that I think we both needed to adjust. And then I think she got so relaxed with it that she wasn't going to get that phone call, or there was no one from my department going to come to the house and knock on the door, that I was safe. Mm-hmm. Even though I wasn't, but I would tell her I was.
Right. Yeah. I think any of us who've been in the job long enough have had a spouse ask us if we are as safe as we can possibly be, or out of danger, or in some situation, they want that reassurance that there's no possible way that something's going to happen to us, when we all know the fact is that we can't control everything. And there's times where we may tell a little white lie to make them feel a little better. Right.
Well, I honestly, and I'll kind of parlay what you're saying there, but law enforcement officers, it's a joke. Everything's a joke. A dead body's a joke. Someone who just shot off their head, we used to call it a salad bowl. So I'm responding to a suicide, and then you get someone going, "A salad bowl?" I'm like, "Yep, we got a salad bowl here." And it's still spinning around in the parking lot. But that's the way we deal with it, humor. Yeah. So when we come home, "Oh yeah, I had this domestic today. Do you believe these two were drunk at 2 a.m? And then they continue to be,
right.
And that was, us just playing it off. Now, at that incident, you got your ass kicked, and the guy was charged with ag assault, but you just left that out of the conversation,
You left out that detail, right?
Yeah.
So you're going through your career. You got 10 years on. You start having kids, but that's around the same time you get promoted. You're in the warrant division, which is what you've been wanting and asking for, and things are looking good, right?
Things are working perfect. I couldn't even have wrote a better script. I was knocking shit out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
The first day I was on the job as acting corporal, we were looking for a guy that ran from us. We were in a boat yard, so he could be in any one of these boats. And I'm laughing because, hey man, I'm a corporal now. I'm backing up the unit. So this is the start of my career, and most of your listeners will probably laugh their ass off because not everything's roses, So I'm behind the front unit. We're both in marked vehicles, and we're looking left and right. We're not getting out of the vehicles yet. Well, the unit in front of me is a 2-man unit, and the gentleman in the passenger seat points. He's like, Dad, I think he's there. So the deputy operating the SUV slams it in reverse and boom, right into my car. That was my first day. So I called the chief and I said, do you want the good news or the bad news? He says, well, just give me the good news first. I said, we're not hurt or injured. He says, in the bad news? I said, I have to take 2 officers for a piss test. Both vehicles are involved. He goes, ay. So, but it showed how real I was. And I think that's why I got as far as I did, because I was honest.
Mm-hmm.
And things weren't always rosy. I got my ass chewed out a lot. And it's because it was stupid stuff that I even, I'd park behind the commissioner's vehicles and then walk into headquarters. Kept telling me not doing it. I'd be like, oh, yeah, I forgot. I'll do it. I'll do that tomorrow. So that stuff in and of itself was, it was fun for me,
mm-hmm.
And I did not take that shit seriously because I knew I performed really well on the job.
Right.
So I was a seasoned officer. I pretty much knew all the players involved. If a domestic call came out or if it was a warrant, I saw a name. I could have been on Letterman for stupid human tricks. I couldn't forget what I had for lunch, what time I need to be home, but I couldn't tell you anything. But at work, I could tell you names, addresses, and how many contacts I had without even going to the computer.
Yeah. I'm curious, what was your social structure and social life like during this time? Were you hanging out with other, were you hanging out with your partners? Was that something you thought of a lot, or was this just something you were in the lifestyle of the running and gunning cop? What was that like?
You know what? I used to say it, and I said it through my divorce proceedings. I was a rough, tough cop during the day, and I would go home and be the biggest pussy at my wife. She'd yell at me, I'd vacuum, and I'd be trying to vacuum quickly. So that was a different avenue where she was controlling. She said married people don't go out. Cops, they're notorious for cheating on people. And so it was the little things, and I didn't want to cast any dispersions about me. And, guys talk, especially in law enforcement, we all talk shit on one another, whether they want to or not, they're talking. So I pretty much stayed away from that avenue of going out.
Oh, interesting.
And which will lead up to my story to begin with. So I ended up as a sergeant,
mm-hmm.
and basically I was working my ass off. I had life by the balls. I was internal affairs, SWAT negotiator, so we had training with the FBI. We had all kinds of shit going on. So the SWAT and then counterterrorism, I'd go down there once or twice a week in Philly. And then do some training, and then I was the operations. I ended my career as an operations officer, so I was like third in command in that unit, which is our major incident response team. So alongside of that, I was still running things for my department, the civil division, our extradition division, which I failed to mention at the beginning, which is a unit designated to drive, I think it's a 500-mile radius to Jersey, New York, Maryland, to retrieve people that were taken into custody on our warrant, and then we'd go get them back.
Right.
So I was in charge of that unit as well, and that unit, there was 2 of them, so you kind of had to basically schedule your trips to certain facilities to minimize overtime. It was always about overtime.
Always is about overtime.
Yeah, it's the truth. And honestly, I pretty much cut that overtime out, and I know that they were wondering why, when I got supervision, that there was no more overtime being had. And it was, listen, I understood the management issue, and as a sergeant, you're facilitating the employee with the chief, and you're somehow trying to sugarcoat a policy he's doing, and then you're sugarcoating what they're doing on the street. So, I if someone needed to get out early, go to a conference for their kids, I'd say, shoo on out. I'll cover your call. And then, the next day, if he needed to hang over for an hour, he wasn't jamming us for overtime. So it's essentially a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
My chief did at one point ask me why there was no more overtime. And I said, there's a thing called plausible deniability. And he's like, yeah, I said, you really probably don't want to know. But, so we skirted the issue with that. And the guys were happy about that because if they needed to leave, they could. And it was about their family.
Right.
And on the tail end, hey, honey, I'm going to be home later. I'm not working overtime, but I'm going to work over a little bit.
What was your favorite? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
I was saying, what was your favorite thing about being a sergeant?
You know what? The ability to knock things out of the park by a phone or roll up on a scene. And these people I've already had contact with. In fact, one guy I've arrested personally 15 times on child support warrants. Mm-hmm. And I roll up to the scene. He's given everybody an attitude. He's bitching at them, this, that. I roll up. He goes, hey, Raff, what's up? He's like, oh, shit, you got promoted. I said, yeah, because I got the 15 arrests on you, so they promoted me. He's laughing, and all my guys are like, how do you fucking know him? And it was funny because I would always use my voice to get someone into custody. I'd never display my firearm, would never be authoritative. There's different vernacular for different customers, I used to say. In the lower portion of the county, the social and economical portion of it, it's low income. So if I went to a house and I was like, hello, sir, I need to come in your house and check for this said warrant here, they'd be like, you're a pussy. and they wouldn't let me in or whatnot. So I try to teach the guys that too. You have to, and that was one of the really good goals of being a supervisor, which was teaching. Mm-hmm. Maybe you didn't have to go hard on them. Maybe you just had to go to everybody's surroundings. If I busted his friend's balls at a bar and I bust his dad's balls and his mom's ball, well, chances are he's going to walk in on his own. Mm-hmm. And that was the way I utilized my position. So it was fun as a sergeant. I had that ability to do it, but I also worked so many different department items. So it was easy for me. I was so quick being a dispatcher, answering phones, 911, giving instructions over the phone, that when I turned into a sergeant at the sheriff's office, I had that ability to multitask.
So,
and go ahead.
So what was the first sign that something was off?
Something was off, and I want to say it was 6 months towards the end of my career, but I understand that it could have been a year. I noticed that I started sicking out from work.
Taking sick time.
Yeah, taking sick time. And I can tell you right now, I think I had like 2,000 sick hours. I never sicked out. If I did sick out, it's because I needed to go to a class trip somewhere. Sick time was for, other than sick. You're sick, you muddle through work. So I never used any time. And I'd make sure I'd try to get my schedule as such that I could go to the kids' baseball games or soccer practices. So I'd manipulate my schedule. And even so, I did so even more as a sergeant, but stayed readily available on my phone in case someone would need me, because the other supervisors were in charge of different other divisions. Mm-hmm. And then, so they pretty much didn't know what I do, which essentially that's what you want to do out there. You're showing how crucial you are to the job. So about 6 months prior to, I started noticing a difference in my pattern. I always drank alcohol, never shied away from it. But I also didn't abuse it. And, I look back at my career now and I'd have a beer with the barbecue after work, or, a beer when I come home after 3 to 11s. Nothing ever big. It wasn't really, I needed it. It was like, oh, hey, I got a beer in the fridge, whatnot. So slowly but surely that started getting more broad. My drink would be, I would no sooner get my uniform off, I'd be at home and I'd crack a beer. And we had take-home cars, just so you're aware. So I would just crack a beer as soon as I walked in the door, uniform. So I would start to get like 2 or 3 deep in it. So I started noticing the change, but then again, I didn't think anything of it. And being in the position I am now and having hindsight being 2020, I noticed what I was doing and I saw what I was doing in the mirror that, okay, well, it's fine. And then it turned into I'm having 2 or 3 beers, and then I'm having 4 or 5 with the kids doing homework. And then I'm going to their functions. And then as soon as I come home, I'm drinking till 12, midnight, 1 in the morning. And I noticed that started taking a toll on me because I'd go back in at 0600 and I knew I smelled like a brewery. So I'd go to CVS or Walgreens and get that Axe spray so no one could smell it. I brushed my teeth real good. I would shower right before work. But looking back, guys knew. But I was reveled as a supervisor that I was able to do all these things. I would answer the phone at night when they had a problem or they needed help with a report and, or wording on a report that they, had a roadblock. So I still handled all that stuff. So most of the guys didn't even understand. I wasn't slurring my speech. And I grew to love natural light. And it's funny because later on in this story, they're like, your last drink was natural light. That sucks. But, yeah, it was cheap, inexpensive. It was water. And I had the ability to know how much my intake was before I'd be slurring my words and how much sleep I needed before going into work. And I'll tell you this, before the end of my career, a couple months before, a deputy from Okeechobee, Florida, her name's Jessica Francis. She ended up calling me up. She said, a friend of mine, they have an autistic child. They're in your jurisdiction. Their car broke down. I can't get any answers. They don't have any money to stay an extra night. And all they did was drive up from Okeechobee, Florida to see Sesame Place with their autistic child. So that day I said, no problem. I called the car dealership. I said, hey, can you we didn't even look at it. I said, these people only have one time to stay and they want to go to Sesame Place. You're going to think you get it done. He's like, I'll work on it now, Sarge. I'll see what I can do. I said, all right. So I'm not looking for any handouts or anything like that. I'm looking to just push her up to the head of the class so they can get out. I go back to the hotel, said the same thing to them at the hotel. I said, they don't have any money to stay and their daughter, they want to get to Sesame Place. So that was in April. And instead of just going, okay, yeah, I checked it out, Jess, nothing's going to happen. Well, I could see that they were dropping the ball. Everybody was. So I got a couple patrolmen from my department, neighboring jurisdictions, and we took that kid lights and sirens to Sesame Place. And she was so happy. The little girl, she's autistic. She's in a wheelchair, but she was so happy going woo woo the whole ride. And Sesame Place opened up their red carpet for them. And it was really rewarding to me. I asked nothing in return. And neither did Officer Francis as well, because, what the funny thing is she was blaming me and saying it was all me. And I was saying, no, it's all her. And so we had our 3 major networks doing a story on us, newspapers. I don't like the limelight. So she called me, the news reporter. I'm like, oh, I'm busy. I'm in court. I could do a phone interview. Mm-hmm. I think that's when I started drinking. And that's when I started noticing, because I would have loved to be on TV. I was on TV, for a SWAT negotiation. They asked me to be interviewed. I'm like, my chief does all the public relations. And my chief's like, just handle it. I trust you. So those things were easy peasy. I could articulate. I could turn street if I need to. Yo, brother. I had that ability to flip flop my language to meet my clientele. So Officer Francis was telling everybody, and it's on the news all over. Everybody's giving me accolades and like, hey, that was really nice that you did that. I'm like, I don't want anything for it. I think Jess should do it. She's the one who made the phone call. I just asked and took her to. So that's when I started to notice that beer was starting to ruin my life, or rule my life, I should say, but I still didn't think it was a problem. And then it got worse. Then it got, well, it's 2 in the morning and I can't go into work now at 6, or I can't go to work at 3. So I better sick out. Well, that meant that I could drink all day. And so I started to utilize my sick time, and I would pass it off that I, hurt my arm, or I was playing with the kids and I pulled a thigh muscle. I had so many excuses. They're like assholes. Everybody's had one. And the ultimate thing is I didn't even see me using these excuses. I was believing this shit, and, my son, I have full custody of my son. The other 3 live with my ex-wife. They're all brothers and sisters, same wife, same baby mama, I should say. But so they live with her. He lives with me. She kicked him out when he was like 11. I took him in. I'm like, yo, bro, we're going to get the other ones. Don't worry about it. Which to this day, I gave her more fuel to the fire for the other 3. I'm still able to take care of my oldest son, but she inadvertently thinks that I'm capable of helping with the other children. But that's my sidetrack there. So basically, I started knowing this downward spiral. And I remember seeing ads on TV at like 2 or 3 in the morning when I'm like a 12-pack in or a 30-pack in. I used to say, oh, well, I'm just going to drink the top deck today and I'll drink the next day tomorrow. Well, that top deck turned into the bottom deck. And then I'd see these commercials at like 2 or 3 in the morning of people, if you know someone who's substance abuse. And I used to look, I'm like, who the fuck's going to do that? Who would have time in their day to go down to either Florida or California to go and talk about beer or whatever? And, I really downplayed it, but it must have made an impression of me if I'm talking bad about them.
Mm-hmm.
And so this progression was getting worse and worse and worse. I was taking 3 days, then I was taking 2 days. I was making up excuses. I needed some vacation time here. And basically I was depleting everything. Now, at the same time, the chief put out a memo and it said, I can remember the date, as of August 2nd, no visible tattoos. And so I took that as, well, I better hurry up and run and get tattoos before the August 2nd timeline. So as you see, I got all kinds of dumb tattoos. I got Joker card. I got, this is, well, I'll get later into this one, the meaning, but I have, you can't break me. I got, it's always darkest before the dawn. I got a Spartan helmet and walk a mile in my shoes. So all these tattoos were literally, I believe, in a 6-month span. No one said a word. And it was at the point where the chief said, all right, everybody has visible tattoos. Everybody has to wear a nude sleeve. And so I was like, well, I got to wear a nude sleeve now. Who cares? Well, we all look like burn victims. It was funny. Like, oh, I just saved a baby from a fire with these, nude sleeves. I used to say, hey, can we get to the black ones? Just wear black because our uniforms were black. No, I went nude. Hey, you know what? He get paid chief pay. I'll listen.
Right.
So no one in my department. Now, I'm sure I walked up to work and either held a roll call or held a divisional meeting. They knew I was a drunk. I mean, my face was red all the time. I'm sure my bones and everything were oozing of alcohol. And the day in question, it's not even in question, is I looked in the mirror and I said to myself, Joey, you are a freaking mess. You got to get help. And at that point, it was really weird because I noticed it, but at the same time, I didn't notice it. And I could identify if you had a problem, but I couldn't identify my own problem or take care of my own problem. I could give you a list of things to do. Boom, boom, boom. This is how you get out of your issue. But for myself, I couldn't. And that morning I looked in the mirror and I'd cut myself like 16 friggin' times with the razor. I looked like my face was blood. I had tissue stuck to it. My hair's all a mess. I'm red. I feel like I'm going to throw up. And still, I didn't recognize I had a problem. So if it's okay, I'd like to kind of go into my story about really what happened to me and the silver lining in the cloud at the end.
Yeah, of course.
So basically, I was drinking way too much. I knew it. And there was a lot of employees that knew it as well. They later say, oh, Sarge, I wish we'd been there. We talked about doing an intervention. My ex-wife was so rude and disrespectful and talked poorly about the kids. And yet I still smiled and did whatever I had to do, did conferences, coached their games, did everything. And I was still able to, I left my ex because I wasn't able to put my staple on them, on the kids. It was more or less I was treated like a fifth child. Like I said, I'd go to work all rough and tumble, and then I'd come home and I'd be the biggest pussy ever. And the kids saw that, and by witness, they would treat me as such, the fifth kid. Well, I'm not going to listen to you. I'll listen to mom, so, but that's a minor glitch in the system. But, and I will preface this, I gave her all the fuel she could use, for anything with me, in reference to this incident. So that morning I know I was drinking. I had the day off. It was a Saturday. I had taken my blood pressure medication early on. It was a new one. And I say this because your listeners may know someone that was me, or they may be that person. And I'd love to catch people before they fell, because I fell, and I fell hard. So the morning of, I'm hammered. I take the blood medication. And when you go to a doctor, what do you say? Oh, I'm a social drinker. Yeah, I have a beer with the barbecue. Oh, I just go to socially drink. You don't say, hey, listen, I'm like 6 deep every night, or maybe I'm 12 deep on the weekends. You don't say that. So nonetheless, I wasn't giving the doctor any information that probably could have been necessary. So I was on a beta blocker because I had heart condition, which probably had to do with my drinking. Later I look and I have a blood disorder. All this shit that I didn't. You start noticing that you disregard your own health. That's the first step. I don't want to go to a doctor. They're going to find something wrong. I was throwing my daughter in a pool. For 3 weeks, I walked around. I'm like, man, I hurt my shoulder. Not taking anything. No Tylenol. I'm just like, man, this sucks. It got really bad one night. So I went to the hospital. They did all this testing on me. They're like, yeah, it could be a bone bruise or whatever. They did whatever they do, ultrasound. And the next thing I knew, I was wheeled back to the ER, and they drugged me up and put me in ICU because I had a blood clot. These are the things that I look back at, that I wasn't taking care of myself. And I was taking care of the kids, and I was taking care of her, and I was making the money. I was working 3 different jobs. I was doing security. I was doing anything I could to keep her a stay-at-home mom, because she had a master's degree plus 30. So she's a teacher. Boom. That's a win-win situation. I'd rather have my kids with her than, so that was pretty much the contract that we had, even after we divorced as well. Because I understand that I wouldn't want my kids in daycare if my ex is available to really mentor them and teach them. And I always used to say, she's the academic king, I'm the athletic queen, and say it that way. Because my kids, they adored all the sports. I did all the sports for them. She knew nothing about sports. And, once second grade kicked and they're doing fractions, I'm out. Peace.
So you're burning a lot of candles at a lot of ends.
Yeah. I'm not smarter than a second grader. What was that show? So nonetheless, I'm drinking heavily. The night of, it's a Friday night, I get a weekend off, and I started drinking. And I took my beta blocker that went with my heart medication. To this day, I have no idea if it had anything to deal with this, but the next morning, which was 4 hours later, when I was still drinking, I took a beta blocker again. And my son to this day said, Dad, you weren't yourself. I went in his room and I told him I was going to go get the youngers and we're going to have a great weekend, blah, 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 blah. I had been drinking, and I don't want to say I was blacked out, but something was wrong. I got in my patrol car and I drove down to pick up the kids. So there's a faux pas, number one. And then I said, oh, you know what? It's not a big deal. I'll just come home and then, park it. So the kids are in the car, and that's when it hit me. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I don't know much of the incident. I know I banged a patrol car off a couple curbs. I had the wherewithal to get the kids out of the car right away. And I needed to find out how I was going to get home. And no one could find me for about 2.5 hours. I couldn't tell you where I was. And then I ended up a disabled vehicle on the side of the road. Someone called in that it was swerving. I was off to the side of the road. I didn't even care about calling anybody. I didn't call anybody. I didn't do anything. And of course, the local jurisdiction comes up on me and they're like, Joey. And I'm hammered. I'm ossified. They didn't know what to do with me. And it's this typical cop approach. The thin blue line isn't anything that's, I'm not looking to help you out because you got jammed up. that thin blue line is just to help someone in trouble. And it could have been prevented, and I'll get back into that. But they didn't know what to do with me. Well, I knew what to do with myself. I remember the TV programs of getting help and treatment. And my dad ended up coming and picked me up. How pathetic. You're 44 years old and your dad picks you up from a scene and you're hammered. And I said, take me to the hospital. I have a problem. And that was the first thing. And I walked into the hospital and I said, I'm an alcoholic and I need help. Huh. That was the hardest words I ever said. And they said, okay, well, we got a bed ready. And I kept saying, I'm sorry, ma'am. Sorry, sir. I'm sorry I'm in here. I'm pathetic. They're like, no, you're not. You're just smart enough to realize it and try to get the help that you need. It's going to be intensive. This wasn't built yesterday. So Rome wasn't built yesterday, however that saying goes. I'll mess them up as we go on with the interview. We'll be circling a horse before the horn or whatever. So nonetheless, I asked for help. There was a mental health facility inside there. They didn't think I needed mental health. They knew I needed substance abuse. And I want to say and preface this, at no time was I doing it to try to get back into my department and trying to save grace. I was doing it for me. And she said, would you like to go to Florida or would you like to go to California? Because I'd indicated I didn't want anywhere near my jurisdiction because A, I wouldn't be able to talk freely because it might be someone I locked up or it might be someone else that really shouldn't know where I'm at. And so I went down to Florida and my insurance covered everything. It covered the flight down, everything. And so I walked into rehab and you went to detox first. And they flew me down. I was picked up by a driver in a black limo. Total cop comes at me like, okay, they took my cell phone. They took everything from me. And now they're driving me to this fucking place. You know, what the fuck are they going to do with me? You know, take me out back and shoot me. So they put me in this facility and the facility's a detox center. Everybody has various detoxes, whether it be heroin and opiate withdrawal. Some were on Suboxone. Some were just weeding off alcohol, which I'm told that alcohol is the worst substance that you could be detoxing from. That's why they put you in a detox center. So in the event, you know, something goes bad, they're there for you and the nurses are there. So I went there. I was scared as shit. I didn't know what was going to go on in my department, nor did I care at that point because I wanted to get fixed. And I went down there just like a cop. What's the report say? I want this, this, and this. I'm an alcoholic. I want to fix it. And so I went down there and it was a great facility. It's called Transformations Treatment Center. So I went down there dejected, embarrassed, and I was there to work on things. You know, I picked up and dropped my son off, my oldest son, and just left everybody for 34 days. Life doesn't tell you there's a yield sign when you're getting out of treatment. Everything is still going on while you're inside. And that's something that you really have to plan for when you get out of treatment. But getting into treatment at the beginning of this, I didn't want to do anything. They were like, okay, well, Saturday we're going kayaking. Next Saturday we're going to the beach. We're going to a labyrinth over to school. It's a big walkway where you can meditate. We have bongos. We have guitars. If you sing, you could sing. We have a recording studio. I mean, this shit was like top notch. After I got out of detox, they put you in a residential home. I used to say you get picked up in the druggie buggies. Everybody gets into druggie buggies and then they go to clinical and study how not to be a drug addict or an alcoholic. So it was hard for me and I didn't want to do anything fun because I was there to get help. Mm-hmm. And one day, one of the counselors they don't stay on site. The counselors stay at the clinical and then they go home to their houses. One makes a special visit to my room and I'm sitting on the bed and I'm scribing how my day is going. And he said, do me a favor and take off your cop hat right now. And the theory was take the hat off. Right. So I did that and I stood there and I'm like, what? He's like, why don't you go to any of these things we're offering? We're offering bowling. We're offering go-kart races. We're paddle boating, the ocean. You've never seen a clean ocean. You live by Jersey and it's shit ocean, so I'm like, well, I'm not doing all these things because I'm here to get fixed. I'm not here to have fun. And he said to me, why do you think that we're having all these these venues and everything they were going to. I said, because you just want people not to get bored about talking about alcohol every day. He's like, no, we're teaching you how to do things fucking sober. And I was like, oh. He's like, you're supposed to have fun. But last time you went to the beach, at what time did you open up your cooler and look right and look left? I'm like, usually around 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. He goes, now you can go and you're sober. You're learning how to do these things. You know, bowling doesn't take 14 pitchers of beer with the guys. You know, a movie, you're not supposed to get hammered before you go and then after. So I really started to get really comfortable down there, and I wasn't scared. Everybody kind of knew I was a cop, but they didn't really know. And I started to kind of understand now. I'd been on this side of the law for so long that I was always helpful to people that were on heroin. I'd take them home to their parents, be like, you got to get him into treatment. Me charging him, he's going to get stuck in the system, and he's going to do life on the installment plan. He's going to do 3 months in, 2 months out, 4 months in, 1 month out. And essentially, that's what you're doing, life on the installment plan. And they can't pay for court costs as it is because we keep ripping them out during landscape season where they make hand over fist money, and then they owe court costs, which is an offense, failure to appear on a cost warrant. So they get stuck in the system. And that's how I always dealt with things as a police officer. Now, it's me now. I'm in there, and I'm seeing what it's like. These people are trying to get off heroin. They're trying to get off opiate addiction. They're the gauntlet, cocaine, pot. Everybody's down there for a different reason. And I used to think, man, they're really fucked up people. Well, that was me. And until I realized that, it's just my drug of choice. Half the people were looking at me like, how the fuck could you drink at 4, 5, and 6 in the morning and watch the news? How could you do that? I would never be able to do that. That became my norm. And I had to break that. And so I went down to the transformations, like I said, and they worked on me. And I was there to get fixed. 30 days, I was going to be out, fly home. Everything's perfect. Well, I started you're not allowed a phone call for the first 7 days. And that's for you to concentrate on everything and not have any type of outside venue trying to tell you what to do while you're inside. Nor do you want to hear the negative opinion that's being thrown upon you while you're down there as well. It hinders your ability to get better. So I had called my son 3 weeks in. I didn't call anybody. And I just felt like I'm not going to call anybody. I'm dejected. They're all going to be pissed off at me. Why am I going to call there? So for some reason, I wanted to call my son to see how he's doing. He and my ex never got along. Like I said, she kicked him out when he was 11 years old, put him across the street and said, come get him. And so there it was, third weekend. I'm like, I better make a phone call. I'm going to look like the biggest dick when I get back that I didn't call anybody. So I called him, and he said, Dad? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, did you gank a phone out of there? I'm like, yeah, I'm like a prisoner down here, And at that point, he's 16. So, we had that kind of rocky relationship before. But the more I think about it, he grew accustomed to an alcoholic father.
Hey guys and girls, I'm going to interrupt this episode to talk a little bit more about our sponsor, ProForce. A couple years ago, I was looking online for a new duty gun to replace my aging HK. My agency was taking a long time to close the deal, so I decided to purchase my own Glock Gen 4 G17. I shopped around and found out about ProForce and their insane prices on firearms and accessories, not just from Glock, but from all the major manufacturers, including SIG, Smith & Wesson, Ruger, HK, Colt, Remington, Springfield, and many others. Now, if you're a cop anywhere in Los Angeles or Orange County or even northern San Diego, you already know about ProForce and their amazing deals that they have at their store in Brea. They are only open to first responders, fire, law enforcement, medics, etc., and they are here to serve us. When they reached out to me to talk about working together, I wanted to learn more about them, so I spent a lot of time on the phone with them because though they're known for their great customer service, I just wanted to make sure they were a right fit for this show. Well, ProForce has 2 retail locations, Orange County, California, and Prescott, Arizona. So if you're near either, make sure you stop in and see their selection. They've gotten rid of those 2 to 3 hour wait times that they kind of became famous for, and they've instituted an appointment system that makes your purchase so much faster. And they've got everything you want to go with your brand new gun, holsters, lights, sights, ammo, and more. Check out their newest deals at proforceonline.com. And in fact, if you go into the store in Brea in Orange County, and tell the clerk you heard this ad, you'll get 20% off a Streamlight TLR1 pistol light. I use the TLR1 myself, and it's an awesome light, so get 20% off yours in store. Just tell the sales associate the secret password, the Squadron. All right, back to the episode.
I would do everything, but I'd always have a beer in my hand. And prior to this incident, I will tell you, it started out as progressive, and then it got progressively worse. It was a full-time job to be an alcoholic. I had to, and this is what I relate, and when I tell some of my stories to people, that you may not be there yet, but you're going to be the way you're going. And I'm not a preacher. Maybe you're not, but I can point you in the right direction. It's up to you to get the help you need. So the full-time job consisted of me buying a 30-pack at local beer distributor, and then blowing through that in a day and a half. And then I was like, well, I can't go back there. They're going to think I'm an alcoholic. So I would switch all my beer distributors, and I would drive around to each one differently. It started to become a full-time job, 30 beers a day. And you say, oh my God, it was normal. It was like water for me. And then I would hollow out the oatmeal box and click open the beers before my son would get home and put 3 of them in an oatmeal box. So he didn't hear me click, and I put it up on the shelf. I hid them behind the microwave. I built a thing out of pallets for mail and stuff like that. Well, I'd put it underneath there. Like, I was the best alcoholic. I was awesome at hiding, but I wasn't. I was just fooling myself, and I wasn't fooling anybody around me because they saw it. Mm. So I'm back in transformations, and I'm doing my thing as a rehab, and I'm really trying to facilitate. I'm teaching these young kids how to cook, how to clean. And once again, here comes the counselor. I'm at clinical. They're like, you're here for you to get better, not them. You're not here to teach them. I said, well, I'm teaching them life skills, so when they go home, they know what they're doing. No, that's not your job. And as police officers, that's what we do. And you see someone hurting, you're going to help them in any way you can. And I understood that half these people that were kicking heroin and opiates and all that, they'd been in and out of the system, some of which are down there because they're trying not to get time, and they're going to try to walk off their sentence in a rehab. So that wasn't my case. I wanted to get fixed. So I called my son. He's like, Mommy kicked me out. She put me in another school the day after you left, and I'm in a different school district. And I said, well, listen, what are you doing now? He's like, well, my girlfriend's family came and picked me up to take care of me. I'm like, that's awesome. Good deal. I was like, when I come in, I'm getting off the plane on Thursday, the following Thursday. I said, I'm getting off the plane at night. I want you at our house on Friday morning. I'll make an appointment to go to get you back in your school. He's like, okay, you promise? I'm like, I got you. Mm-hmm. And he's like, how you feeling? And I go, I feel amazing. And they take you to the gym. You get on the gym bus. So every night I was at the gym. There was nothing else to do. And built like a brick shit house when I came back. I had 6-pack abs. I was all sorts of feeling good. Mm-hmm. So I put them in, and now I'm back from treatment, and now there's a whirlwind swooping around me. They're going to charge me. They're not going to charge me. DA reviewed the charge. And all this is on the news. It's in a local newspaper. My dad used to laugh, and it hurtful at the time, but he would laugh and read the front page. He'd be like, you beat Trump out again. And as funny as it is now, it wasn't funny back then, because they scrutinized everything I did that day and nothing of what I did in the newspapers prior to. And so nonetheless, I take him to go get go to the counselor, guidance counselor, pick up your classes and whatnot. And at this time, he's a sophomore, and he doesn't say a word. Guidance counselor says, well, you were out of here for 2 weeks, and now you're back. And anything we should know about? My son's like, no. So I said, excuse me, ma'am, I'd like to say something. She's like, yeah, go ahead. I said, his dad's an alcoholic. She said, well, who's his father? I said, I am. And my son just looked. He wasn't embarrassed. And he looked at me like, he said it. He said it.
Wow.
And I was doing good. I was doing real good. So, but here's the problem. I got charged with a DUI. And because I told them I was on some sort of pill, they charged me with an M1 as well. And there was a lot of negotiations that went into that with my attorney, which I was like, I don't care. We'll do anything. And they wanted to change me to endangering the welfare of a child, 4 counts. And I was scared as shit at this point. I didn't even care about jail time. I cared about my kids.
Right.
And I was like, if you're going to put them on the stand to testify against me, then I'll just plead guilty. And somehow the rigmarole, through guilty pleas and whatnot, they got me to plead to a DUI and an M1 and left everything off the table and wrote a letter saying they weren't going to do it. Not that that mattered to me, because the more guilt I had about what I put those children through is worse than any sentence that you could give me. And the bottom line is that I could see everybody else floundering, but I couldn't see myself. So here I am in front of the courts, in front of my subordinates, that I was their rock. I was the one that would help them. They get in a domestic situation with their wife and they'd call me up and I'd go over to their house off duty and say, hey man, you guys can't be doing this shit. You can get involved in police stings. You get a record. You get injured. All that stuff's going to happen and it spirals and you're going to lose your job anyway. So you won't be able to provide for your children. There's all this shit like that I did on the side that I didn't do for myself. And so there I was in front of my men, essentially. And the judge read, obviously, and I'm sure it's the same way in California, they read the probable cause affidavit, but most of the times they just incorporate it on a guilty plea, incorporate the affidavit into court record instead of reading it. But not my case. They had to read the whole thing in open court. I was the first case. They kept sending other cases to other judges. They kept me in front of this judge, more than likely as a statement. I look back now. So the judge says, you know what? It's really nice that you got help on your own, but 8 o'clock in the morning, you got the kids in the car and you're drunk, and I said, well, Your Honor, if I may interrupt, I'm an alcoholic. And I went down for treatment. He says, I recognize that you went down for treatment on your own. He said, but you're going to jail. I'm like, first time DUI and M1. I'm like, okay, I'll go to jail. My attorney says, well, just get house arrest. And that way you just do 5 days of house arrest in your house. I go, no, I want to go to jail. And he's like, why? And I said, because I am just going to sit home and drink for 5 days. The jail will come by, house arrest. I'm loaded. They're going to beam me right to the jail. I said, I don't want any of that bullshit. I'll go to jail for 6 days. So I go. That was a rough time for me. Really rough time because a lot of people knew I was a cop right away. It was a constant battle every day. I just quit drinking the day before I went in there. So I was home 76 days and the pressure. And I can tell you right now, if I stub my foot, that's a reason to drink. If I have a fight or an argument with my ex, that's a reason to drink. So there was no not reason to drink. And of course, I facilitated myself into a 76-day relapse. And when you relapse and you start drinking again, the most difficult thing that you could do is sit and wallow and sit and go, okay, well, I lost my job. Now, I was very unfortunate. I was fortunate enough that I had 27 years on, so I was able to retire and start collecting my pension. But I was young enough that I didn't want to retire. I still wanted to work. And, I could have fought it. And obviously, the sentence didn't outsay, the crime was DUI and the first time offense, and he's getting 40 days in jail essentially to 6 months in probation. So, I was fighting with that constantly. Maybe I should have just pled guilty and had a bench trial. Well, the bench trial is going to go through the officers that are involved. I don't want to put them in the stand, but they didn't take blood, urine, no breath, no nothing. They just said, okay, it's disabled, that I'm on his way. And I went on my own. So I'm like, I should be helped here. But nonetheless, I did the 6 days in jail and I performed over 200 hours of community service as well as walked off my probation, which is a joke anyway. They just want the money. You call on the day of your birthday every month and it goes, do you want to be in any altercations? Yes, 1, 2. It's a joke. Yes, I had contact with cops and I got a DUI. Like, who's going to say that? So it was a total joke. But now I'm back and now I'm drinking again. And I lost a lot of months. Once you start, you forget a lot of shit that's going on in your life. Like I said, I was able to retire. I had all the time in the world and didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went back to the, we're going to get back into the mental health issue. My substance abuse had started again. I went to this, it's called Lenape Valley Foundation, nonprofit that works for the county. And the day after I flew home, which was September 18th, September 19th, I was at their window knocking on the door saying, I need help. And so later determined, they talked to the facility, that not only did I have a substance abuse, but with most alcoholics, they hide. And I was the best hider. I was drunk, so I'd say, switch to text. I'm with the kids. I did everything possible to not see people, to not walk into people, to not get in any discussions. They could smell me. Mm-hmm. They could do this. So I get diagnosed from Lenape Valley, and I have a psychologist now. I have a case manager now. I have an alcohol case manager. I have a psychiatrist, doctor. I've never seen so many doctors in my friggin' life. But it was determined that I had PTSD and that I had bipolar 2. All of which could have been affected from the job, could have been affected from my childhood. And they don't know when it happened. But of course, I try to fix that. Oh, I can fix that, right? You can't fix it. You can manage it. Nonetheless, I was very fortunate to get my retirement, and now I'm on disability because I can't work. I can't carry a gun. And, of course, my attitude towards certain people sucks. So, but they're still trying to change that. I don't know if they could change that at all. So here I was, an alcoholic, being treated for a substance abuse issue, but the underlying issue was my mental health issues. And it became difficult with me because I was like, oh, wow, I'm retarded now. And this is, a typical cop. Oh, wow, yeah, I'm in rehab. I look like a piece of shit now. And here I go relapsing. And I'm working for this facility that I'm doing real well with them. And so they realize the mental health. They realize I'm hiding because of my mental health. So they start medicating me. But in the interim, the facility I went down there for thinks I have a year's sobriety, and I'm a total fraud. I'm flying to Florida to do videos for them. I'm flying to Chicago, Connecticut, Texas, talking about trying to get cops to go in. And when I say try to get them in, because no cop wants help and no cop wants to admit that they have a problem with drinking. I don't care if you tell me one guy, none of them do. It's a badge of really disrespect towards the badge, and it's not the thin blue line, because now all of a sudden you're a problem and we've identified it and they ain't going to do anything about it. So the big fraud I go around talking and speaking to everybody, and here I am walking around being an addict again. They flew me to Chicago. I showed up at the hotel room drunk. From the plane, I just kept drinking. Now, let me preface this by saying it took me 2 years to get a service animal, a PTSD service dog, fully trained. I had to go train, and I'm away with him for 3 months to learn he learns my cues, I learn his cues, and they don't let you leave until so he's allowed to go wherever I go, and he's been so helpful, and he flies on a plane. I get on a plane in Chicago, all sorts of jacked, and I have the dog with me, and the plane doesn't take off yet. They put me in a seat with 3 rows, and then it's not filled. The seat's not totally filled, so they put him in front of me, which is he flies with me anywhere. So I decide that I'm hammered enough, and the staff have to put me on a plane in a wheelchair. I know they felt bad for me. They knew I was a veteran. They see the PTSD service dog. They felt bad for me. Well, halfway through the flight, I wake up, and I'm like, shit, I'm going to land soon, and I'm going to have to meet with some representatives. So, of course, Act 2 gets in, spray yourself with Axe, brush your teeth, check in the hotel room, get a shower, disinfect yourself. Well, I had, during that flight, taken Loki, which is my service dog, and walked up and down the aisles saying, hey, if anybody has any drugs now, just put them to the center aisle. We'll forget it. I was so fucking hammered. I was just having a good time, and no one knew how to take my personality. So by the time I got to the hotel, they were already tipped off because they booked a flight through their facility. And so they had called looking for whoever they put on that flight. And they know I could be me because I am crazy motherfucker when I'm drunk or when I'm sober. I like to make people laugh. I'm always joking around. So they're like, well, maybe, they just didn't know how to take Joey because they know me down there.
Mm-hmm.
I was in so many things with them. I was down there visiting, all kinds of crap. So here I am in Chicago, and I'm 86th from United Airlines. That's the first, oh, hey, they said, we're not going to fly you back. You were disruptive on the flight flying out. So now they have to change my flight because now I fucked up on the plane. I ran into this guy. I call him Saint Nick. His name's Nick, and he's a recovering addict like myself, professional hider like myself. And he works for the facility, advocating for them and to try to help cops go. And that's how I came into play because they have an excellent facility for first responders and military. And they're segregated away from the public so that you could talk to the people of your own problems. Maybe you're not an addict that you don't feel good about yourselves. Now, you're still in class with them from time to time. But so Nick sees me, and we go out to dinner that night, and I'm really good, man. I brush my teeth good. I look good. I'm wearing a suit. I look like ass. I'm red in the face. I probably look like, I'm detoxing 17 hours or so. And we go out to dinner, and Nick's like, order whatever you want. I'm like, I'll just take a cherry soda. I'm good. I go back to the hotel that has beer in it. I'm like, I'll take a 6-pack. I'm down in it. So that night he came to my hotel room. Didn't say a word. He's like, okay, tomorrow morning, we want you at 9. We're going to speak to this, and this. I'm like, okay, yeah. And then he walks out of the room, and I'm starting to detox. I'm starting to throw up. I'm starting to do everything that I know I'm detoxing. I call my girlfriend. I'm like, I'm detoxing. She's like, well, go have a beer, get that detox out. I'm like, I can't. I got to go speak. So once again, I'm screwed in the head. And Nick came back to the hotel room the next morning. He's like, did you have breakfast? I'm like, yeah, I don't feel so good. I said, I think I'm allergic to scallops. First thing you say when you're an alcoholic, you find an excuse. And I think I'm going to fly with this excuse. So I keep going with it. And Nick goes out of my room. He makes a couple phone calls, and he comes back, and he said, this is the hardest thing I'm going to have to do, but I'm going to call you out. He's like, have you been drinking again? I said, yeah. He said, is there any way, or is there concern that I need you to go to the hospital right now and get you detox and get you down to Florida? And I was like, I don't have any insurance. My disability didn't kick in for insurance reasons yet because you have to be on 2 years of disability before you get a Medicare. So I'm like, I have no insurance. I got nothing. And yes, I'm an alcoholic. And yes, I relapsed. He said, how long? I told him the whole relapse thing. And he said, I love you. I love you, brother. And I got your back. He's like, I'm going to get you a flight home. And why don't you get your shit together? Do you have enough money to fly down to Florida? And I said, yeah, I do. He said, I'm going to get a bed ready for you. He no sooner I left, they got me an Uber. I was at the store trying to down some alcohol to get away the detox because I wanted to detox down there safely. So here I am, I get home, and I think it's like midnight. It's just me and my son that live here, and I can leave him because he's 18 now. Just what you want to do as a dad, leave an 18-year-old home alone for a month. Yeah. But I took that seriously because I needed to get fixed. And I honestly think through my relapse, I learned more about my illness and what its effects were. But, I look at the second visit. So Nick gets me down there. Well, I have to go down there to all the people that I made videos with, all the people that I knew through passing because I came down there sober and all this. And so now I got to be humiliated, right? So I didn't make eye contact with anybody. They all knew who I was. I'm in the hallways with Loki. We're walking and they all knew who I was. And I started making eye contact with people after about 2 weeks. And I started to understand that my illness being untreated is something that someone else might have. We're cops. And how many times do you deal with a domestic situation, whether it be right, wrong, or indifferent, they're both fighting, you're aggravated from it, and you're not even there, but then you take that home. Or you handle an accident scene where a toddler gets thrown from a car, and he's still in the car seat, but he went 50 yards to be ejected because the car seat wasn't installed right. You think of your kids. Now, I got 4, obviously treating kids poorly, endangering the welfare of a child. Those type of incidents weigh on you, but we're cops. We take pictures with dead bodies and laugh, and then, we yell about a domestic situation. You believe that guy does this and she does that? It's all blown off because we're cops. It's funny, and that's how we deal with things, humor. I never met a cop that didn't. And so I learned to start managing my PTSD. I started realizing when my triggers were. Now, they gave me this dog, and he follows me around everywhere I go. And even when he's off duty, he'll just follow me into a room. He sleeps at the foot of my bed. If I roll over, if I'm having a bad dream, he pops his head up, comes over, says, yeah, are you cool? And then lays back down. When I'm about to trigger, same damn thing. It's funny. I'll be on the phone, irritated, and, he'll come over and he'll put his foot on my foot and then put his snout on my knee. Like, hey, calm down. And, or he knows it's going to trigger. And, nonetheless, he sees it. I calm down. Well, I started to get so bored because I had no direction. And so I would call the My Pillow guy at like 2 a.m. And I'd say, hey, listen, because you've been harassing me with these commercials left and right. I'd say, oh, I want a discount and I want a smaller pillow. And they're like, okay. And I was like, do you have discounted because my son's head's the size of Beetlejuice? Well, I did this until they blocked me. And then I called the Cialis commercial and said, hey, I want that rowboat that's in the commercial. They're like, no, it's for ED. So I'm doing all this shit as jokes, but it's keeping me busy. And so I started building stuff out of pallets. And that kept my mind busy. All the while, they're dealing with my mental health issues. They're helping me with my PTSD. The therapist is going over it. The psychologist is going over it. And then it dawned on me that I'm doing nothing, absolutely nothing that I aspired to do. I lost my job. I'm no longer being able to carry a gun because I, pleaded guilty to an M1. And I started to lose my direction, not my sobriety, my direction, mental health. So I started to realize that I have a story, and that this story, although it may be a little bit similar, it's eerie similar to a lot of guys, what they're going through. And I'd made it my wherewithal that I was going to help people get into treatment and catch them before they fall. And it's for 2 reasons. And I'm lying if I say I worry about the department. I don't worry about any officer's department. I worry about them. It does limit the liability on the employer. It limits the liability on the employee, and usually they're given a tool belt for mental health and they get put back to work. So it's a win-win. You're not worried about legalities as the employee, and you know what? You're not ruining your reputation. So it started out with my community service, and I started to talk to at-risk students. Talk about, how they could get stuck in the system and they can't get out, and that most folks are doing life on the installment plan. And then I talked about alcohol. And then I started talking to officers, and I used to go into their command staff meetings. I still do. They're more broad in that, to look for signs. And the first thing I do on most of my speeches is I make sure I wear a suit and cover up any of my tattoos. I'll speak authoritative during that process. I'll use juvenile. I'll use apparently, and all the the rules of police vernacular over the radio. Mm-hmm. And during my speech, I just take off my shirt and I'm wearing a white t-shirt like I am now. And I'm doing this to make sure that they see all my tattoos. And then I pose the question, does anybody think differently of me? And they're all like, well, no, not really, but they're not being truthful. They did. And then all of a sudden I'm this guy standing up there and I'm talking street to them with all these tattoos. This was one of the things that through my mental health, I was screaming for attention. If you get 9 tattoos in a 3-month span, you might have something wrong with you. And people missed those cues for me. They missed the cues of me smelling like a brewery. Mm-hmm. And like the main goal for me now is like, I could catch that guy and that guy can be back at work and the employer will be happy that he asked for help. I never asked for help. How was I supposed to? You know, I look at the commercials, there are derelicts going down there or this one or that one. I'm a cop. I'm above it. I don't need help. And that was the first observation. But now I knew that. So with my relapse, I learned so much more about myself and my cues to not. So I started helping people. And like I said, it was schools. And I'm starting to write articles for Law Enforcement Today. I write the articles, send them to the editor. They just proofread and they post my articles. I do speeches now for schools. I do speeches now for law enforcement. And I'm getting my name out there. And it's funny because I could care less about my name. Mm-hmm. I want people to see my name and to know that I was a sergeant and to know that I fell during this whole process. And I'm continuing to get up. And not every day's a battle anymore. Every day's a battle as to what I can squeeze in. I was absolutely happy to have the opportunity to speak to the squad room. I thought it's great what you're doing because these are issues that, although no one talks about, it's very prevalent in everybody's department. And I don't care if there's just one, you know there's one or two that you could sit next to roll call and you're like, this guy's not doing good. And you take the job home with you. That's an excuse. Yeah, well, I just drink a little bit. I could stop anytime. I had a dime for every cop that said, oh, yeah, well, I don't have a drinking problem like you. I could stop whenever I want. But yet they're calling me all slurry. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Raff, man. Well, you know, and you're getting that slurred. I'm like, dude, you're still doing the same thing. You need to get help. And I'm a proponent on the stigma of a cop going down the treatment, which the crazy portion of everything is that you're just like them. And them is me. And I had to admit that I was an addict. And the sad part about it is probably 2 or 3 days prior to my relapse, it hit home with me because my son and I were texting back and forth. And he was being rude to me, and I'm like, I'm your father. And he goes, no, you're a fucking addict, through text. And I was like, whoa, I fell back in that proverbial hole again. And I was given a story down at Walter Reed when I was speaking to some military veterans that came back from Iraq. They went to Walter Reed. They went to Germany, and then they flew them back to Walter Reed for mental health issues. And they varied from rape to everything else that they had been doing over there, all kinds of stuff, bombings and whatnot. And I went down there and there was a military guy that spoke before me. And he said, I love this guy's story. Joey Rafferty, Sergeant Joseph Francis Rafferty III is here to speak about his blunders with the Bucks County Sheriff's Office. Whoa, and that kind of hit down there. Mm-hmm. So he tells a story. He says the story is an officer falls into a hole, proverbial of drug abuse, mental illness, whatever. And his sergeant walks by to him and throws him a shovel and says, get the fuck out of your hole. So that sergeant leaves. He thinks he took care of the problem. He's still stuck. His corporal walks by. He has a shovel. He says, I'm still stuck. Corporal throws him a bucket. He's still stuck. They call a priest to him. He prays with him for an hour, but he's still stuck. They call a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist gives him 5 days worth of medication. And if you have PTSD and you're bipolar, you're not going to go back. So he does 5 and he stops. And then someone that has been through it walks by. He says, I'm still stuck. He grabs a shovel and jumps in with him. And he said, now we're both stuck. But I know a few things to try to get out. So it really does the boots on the ground. I I have to honestly say there's a lot of friends that don't call me, don't hang out with me. I'm like a cancer to them. And then I got people that are just closet helpers or closet call-in checks, and I don't out them for checking in on me. I still have a great relationship with my department. All the guys still call me Sarge when I'm in there, whether it be a domestic relations issue with my ex or doing events like this. I always bring my criminal charges, so I'd end up stopping the clerk of court saying this is what I had, this is what I did, so people can review it when I'm talking, because it makes it a true story if you put your name and you put yourself out there in an effort to help. And there's a lot of guys that don't want that help. And I get it. I was there. I didn't want the help. But the bottom line is, would you rather just gracefully fall into that hole and get caught doing something wrong? I can't tell you how many guys would be drinking till 2 a.m. They come in for a 6 a.m. shift. They're still drunk. And maybe they're handling an accident scene. And they get in an accident themselves. They got alcohol in them. And a lot of guys say, no. And it's not me. It's not me. Yeah, I could stop. But all those things is what I said. I don't have time for that. I have no time to be away from my family. I can't be away from the job. They're going to find someone else who's going to be a sergeant in charge of everything that I was in charge of.
Right.
And sure enough, it took a toll on me. I had a stay-at-home ex-wife. I had 4 children. Not 1, 2, 3, but 4 children. Numerous basketball games, soccer games, football, wrestling. And I'd be at every one. I had that ability to multitask that. I also had the ability to multitask all my jobs assigned to me through the sheriff's office as well. Well, I didn't take care of me. And so all those things finally took a toll. And it was crazy because in April, I had told you that I've been dealing with Officer Francis down in Florida, Okeechobee, and I was on top of the world. And not even a couple months later, boom, I ruined my career. And I think it could be stopped. And I'm very thankful that you have me on your program for several reasons. One, I'd like to get the awareness out there. And like I said, I like to use my name because anybody can Google me. And it's a shame. My son was trying to Google my wrestling record, and nothing came up but me, Sergeant DUI, Sergeant Rafferty, DUI, Sergeant convicted, Sergeant being sent to jail. And I didn't want that to define my career, which is why I'm doing. And the way I handle it isn't like I'm holier than thou. Like, it's like that guy that quit smoking. Well, you should quit smoking. I took this and I don't smoke anymore. I don't Bible thump alcoholism. I don't. You either take the tools that I gave you and try to get the help, or you don't. I'm not jamming it down anybody's throats. I'm telling them my story because they may think of that time that they look in the mirror before they go to work and say, man, you were fucking fucked up. You're red. You look like shit. You smell like shit. You're avoiding everybody. And like I said, it's a full-time job. And if someone that's out there that's a cop and it's a full-time job and they're starting to realize that they're hiding beers, that they're drinking all hours, and they're doing everything that I did to fall into that hole, I couldn't get myself out. I had no idea what I was doing, and I couldn't stop. It started with, I'll stop Monday, I'll stop Friday, but I'd still continue.
One of the things that you brought it up, you mentioned it, and then I think is a real hang-up or fear for a lot of guys is dealing with the shame, and then finding yourself in a room. I don't know what the rehab therapy is like, but I think of like an AA meeting where you're all sitting around in folding chairs in a circle, and there has to be some part of you, or was some part of you, that was scared about not only just admitting those things outright and being ashamed of that and the things that it caused and the accident with the kids and all that, but then realizing that you've hooked and booked these addicts for various crimes throughout your career, and now you're in the same room with them on the same level playing field. How do you deal with that shame?
It was very difficult at first. At first, I was ashamed of myself. I didn't want to talk to anybody. Like I said previously, that I tried to help everybody, and everybody started to know I was a cop. And everybody that I saw in those chairs, and you're spot on. You go to clinic all day, you're in a round circle. It's just like AA. But they're working on how you can deal with things in a proper protocol for alcohol, for every DOC that you possibly could have.
Mm-hmm.
What was difficult for me is that I saw a person there, and I started to actually care for the people that were there.
Mm-hmm.
And I could identify, okay, that's a shitbag. He's trying to work off the system. That guy, you're still eyeing people up as much as we say as cops we're not. I could totally eye up someone in a minute and I'd be spot on.
Right.
And I still to this day, but it was difficult to get past that. And there was like a pamphlet given to me. It's called Honesty. And it was, pretty much words that indicate honesty or not indicate honesty. And I was given the one, and you were supposed to circle what word you really took out of this honesty. And I got self-deception. We are the best self-deceivers of ourselves. I'm not a drunk. I can quit any time. Oh, you know what? I have the day off. It's only natural light. All those things. We're great at it.
Mm-hmm.
I stub my toe. Of course I'm going to drink. Well, these people that are next to me, they're doing the same damn thing. And only they're really having a problem with it, and they're not identifying it. Some go through their whole career. I could tell you right now, I know a couple people that are still cops that do the same thing I do, and you could see it, but nothing ever gets dealt with.
So what's let me ask you that question then. So, if someone's listening to this and they have someone in mind, a friend, a partner, a beat car, and you said that everybody knew, but nobody stopped and confronted you or asked, how can somebody begin that conversation with a partner?
It's amazing that you say that, because I could sit here and preach all day that I would have listened. I would have went down there. I wouldn't have.
Sure.
And
yeah.
You're full of shit. I don't have a problem. And then I'd wait 2 days to drink again. And then I'd just be back at square one.
Right.
It's an excellent question. If the guy sitting next to you, if you care about him enough, then you'll talk to him. We have no problems with settling the domestic. We have no problems talking with our lieutenants and chiefs. We have no problems with anything law enforcement related, but this kid's home. And my question to whoever is the one that notices and identifies that may be the guy, that's the time that you want to sit down. That is the time you want to sit down with family members. And I know it sounds like an intervention. It's off duty. Go to their house, speak to them, talk to the wife, because I'll tell you right now, because I went down to get help, there's a lot of wives in my department right now saying, he does the same damn thing. He drives with roadies. He always has a beer in his hand. He's putting them in coffee cups. So hitting that home makes it pretty prevalent with the spouse. It's difficult. So if you don't want to utilize the spouse, it's maybe the squad room after everybody heads out. Hey, I want to talk to you real quick. Can we just hang back? Those guys, one-on-one, and if you describe it the way I did, but only a more productive manner, because I didn't know I had mental illness. And I think you could slide that in there. The last 6 months you've been sicking out, bud. What's going on? You drinking a lot? Any substance abuse. And cops are not, we're people. There's doctors that were down there, baseball players that were down there.
Right.
It doesn't stop us from being there. So getting someone into treatment, half of is education. If I tell you that your insurance company is going to cover it, or they're going to put you in touch with another insurance company that will cover it, or another facility that will cover it, they're out there, and no one ever gets turned down. You limit, like I said earlier, you limit the responsibility of the employer, that you don't need to tell them that right away, but you have to tell them that you need help. They cannot deny you the help. You get that help and you come back and you keep your job. That's a big thing. When you come back from treatment, you keep your job. I was unfortunate. I fell in the hole. No one talked to me. 76 days. I don't know what to do with myself. Mm-hmm. Having purpose and having all those job titles. And I went from getting a phone call, being on the phone 24/7 to nothing, crickets.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing. That's depression.
I think a lot of people misunderstand. The assumption is if you go to treatment, you lose your job. And that is not the case. I mean, your case, you had a criminal charge you had to deal with that was obviously going to prevent you from going back into work the way you did or were before. But if you're proactive with it, like you say, the vast majority of insurance, the way that it's treated as a health condition, you keep your job. I know officers who've kept their job.
And, that's the amazing part about this is that, and I still to this day could kick myself in the ass if I just admitted I had a problem. And I had a conversation with my chief when I returned, and he grabbed my shield and took my gun. He said, why didn't you just tell me? Why didn't you? I could have gotten you help. Mm. And I said, you had so much responsibility on me that I didn't want to make you look bad. And he said, so what'd you end up doing? Yeah. Made me look bad. Right. And it's the truth. Mm-hmm. If these people can get the help, and it's out there, there's facilities out there in California, first responder programs, they could call Transformations Treatment Center. They fly people in. I know there was a fire chief, and this is for different things, so I'm going to kind of branch out. He was a gambler, and he was like a fire chief, I forget, somewhere in Midwest. And they flew him in, and he was there for gambling because he was losing all his money. Mm-hmm. And there's other people that are in there for, depression, mental health issues, because they have a mental health wing that helps law enforcement and first responders deal with that depression and whatnot. And they deal with the alcohol issues too and whatever, substance abuse. But if there's one thing that I could say to someone, get into treatment. It saves everything. And I made the same excuses that you're going to make right now, which is I don't have time to go away. Everybody's going to think poorly of me. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, no one really needs to know you're down there but your employer. You don't need to tell your buddies. Just I took a mental health thing, and I flew down to Florida, and I couldn't call anybody because I didn't feel like it. Right. You don't owe an explanation to anyone until you get to my level. And I'm taking ownership for my actions, but I'm helping people now. And like I said, if I can help one person that's listening to this program, then I did my job, because everything that I went through could have been preventable. And a lot of people watched me slip and fall from grace, some of which wanted me to, because they wanted my position. They wanted to be on the counterterrorism task force. They wanted to be a sergeant in my position in charge of warrants. So there's often that deals with the department too. Right. But I can tell you, when you come back, you are full of piss and vinegar. You want to just be a badass. You don't have to worry about smelling anymore. You don't have to worry about brushing your teeth, putting Axe spray, hiding your beers. The full-time job is over. And now my full-time job is literally going across America, and I never say no to anybody. They want to fly me in for speakership. I tell them I don't want to get paid. It's not a problem. I'll come in. I'll speak to like 1,000 command staff or subordinates and discuss this whole falling. And because I can't help but think that an officer's life gets destroyed when you take their gun away and they have no ability to be that person they used to be, a problem solver, really cool in their department, and they let substance abuse define them. And I don't want that to happen to others. It happened to me, my fall from grace. But now my goal is, and I don't get paid anything, is to go around and be on a program with you to educate, to that hope that someone listens to my story and goes, wow, that's me. Holy shit. And they may be in the early stages where alcohol is just, social. But there's that one guy that really doesn't get the help he needs, and he falls, and he keeps falling. Everybody's like, I'll get his shift, or I'll get his sector. Right. Because as much as it's a thin blue line, we're all chatty Cathys anyway.
Well, Joe, I'm glad you did say yes to this interview, and I appreciate your time and your honesty and being so open with this path that you took and the struggles. It's hard to find a cop who's willing to talk openly about these things. And when I read your piece in Law Enforcement Today, I immediately reached out and wanted to have this discussion to put a face and a name and a voice to this struggle that so many people are dealing with, and they don't know where to begin. They feel like the world will end if they ask for help. And I think that you've helped, disconnect us from that belief and that misconception that all is lost if we ask for help. So, Joey, thanks for your time today.
I do appreciate that. Thank you so much.
This job is tough, tougher than anything that can be put into a few words or even just one interview here with Joey. But if you want to reach out, start a conversation, ask a question, I invite you to join our exclusive Facebook group. Just search the Squad Room Podcast group and ask to join. It's only open to first responders and other supporters, so we have honest conversations and we can help each other achieve our goals. If there's something you connected with in this episode today and you feel like you need some help, you can check out some links in the squadroom.net. In this episode, we've posted some resources for different organizations around the country that can help begin this healing process. If you've heard something in this episode that you think someone else needs to hear, send them a link from one of these resources or send them a link to this episode. You can do that directly from your podcast players usually, or certainly from our website. You can email it directly to someone, share it to their social page, whatever. You also can get signed up for our mailing list and get some exclusive content there by texting The Squad Room, all one word, to 44222. So in thinking about Joey today and about how his story relates to our badges, our beliefs, actions, discipline, goals, emotions, and service, what strikes me is that Joey's story is consistent with some of the things we frequently talk about, where his beliefs and his actions were out of alignment. He believed he was hiding it. He believed he could stop at any time. He believed he was in control of it, but his actions were proving otherwise. His actions were demonstrating to his partners they knew. They knew. I mean, and of course, the disconnect between those two things just completely shatters any ability to achieve goals. And in Joey's diagnosis, we realize how he was poorly dealing with his emotions and trauma, right? His emotional survival. And as a result, he wasn't able to serve in the way that he wanted to serve. And luckily, Joey is able to find a new way to serve people by sharing this story and hoping to prevent other people from going down the same path. But to me, it just strikes such a chord with badges that he is proof positive that we need to pay attention to those 6 dynamics in our life: our beliefs, actions, discipline, goals, emotions, and service. I often get asked how a listener can help support the show, above and beyond just leaving a review on the podcast player of your choice. We do have sponsors on occasion, but it costs a good deal of money to keep the show up and running and to maintain equipment and some travel, etc., etc. Well, so there's several ways that you can help. They're all known as affiliate relationships, so everything I mention here, we get a percentage of whatever it is you spend. The best, fastest, and easiest one is to Amazon. Everybody shops on Amazon. I got my Prime account. But if you shop on Amazon, go first to our website, thesquadroom.net/Amazon, and use the link there to get to Amazon. When you do that, Amazon tracks that you came to their website through us, and then we get a portion of whatever you spend, a small percentage. It doesn't have to be on cop stuff. It can be on anything, bed mattresses to dish detergent to blue jeans, whatever. And they give us a consideration in response for that. If you do that every time you shop on Amazon, that will really help support the show. There's also a couple other ways that you can help. Onnit, for one, ONNIT.com. They are a health and fitness online store, a juggernaut dedicated to what they call total human optimization. I use their Alpha Brain nootropics a lot. I got some of their kettlebells. They've got a great wide variety of stuff. If you listen to Joe Rogan or Andy Stumpf or any of those guys, you hear them talk about Onnit. Well, you can save 10% using the code SQUADROOM when you go to onnit.com to buy any of their supplements or anything like that. Use that coupon code SQUADROOM or go to onnit.com/squadroom. That's ONNIT.com/squadroom. And you get 10% off of any Onnit product that you purchase. And like I said, that is also an affiliate relationship with us. They give us a little consideration for the fact that you bought through us. Also, great people over at Hardhead Veterans, the tactical helmets. A lot of people are buying Hardhead Veterans these days. My department is quickly catching on to how the high quality of the helmet that they've made and the price that they sell them at. I've had one for several years, probably about 18 months now, and I absolutely love it. And if you use the coupon code SQUADROOM, you get $20 off of your helmet from hardheadveterans.com. You could also get a free Audible trial and a free ebook through audibletrial.com/the squadroom. Sign up through that. Just using an email address, you get a free online book, or a free ebook and a free month trial. Ebooks are a great way to pass, or Audible books are a great way to pass night shifts or commutes or anything like that, assuming you've cut up on the Squadroom podcasts. Ranger Up Clothing, that's another one. Great supporters of the show, another affiliate relationship. Use the coupon code The Squadroom for 10% off your order of anything at Ranger Up. Those are simple, fast ways that you can help support the show that help literally keep the lights on and the microphone warm for the next episodes. All right, if you like this episode, please consider leaving a review on the podcast player of your choice. It really helps us spread the word of the show. As I mentioned, a thank you to Ranger Up for their support. If you need a new t-shirt, something to wear at the gym, something to wear at training, check them out, rangerup.com, and use the code TheSquadRoom to get 10% off your order. As always, I'm available by email. You can reach me, Garrett, 2Rs2Ts at thesquadroom.net. And thank you for listening. Truly, thank you for listening to the show. This was a long one, but it was an important one. All right, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.